It was a Tuesday night, edging close to midnight, though I couldn't tell you the exact time. The clock in the prep room hasn't worked for years, and honestly, no one's ever been in a rush to fix it. In this line of work, time stops meaning much. It becomes less about minutes and hours and more about process, routine, ritual, repetition. Step by step. That's how you keep your mind steady in a place where the line between stillness and something else is always thin. I had just begun suturing the thoracic cavity of a middle-aged man named Richard Collins. He died 2 days prior, blunt force trauma from a vehicle rollover off Route 9. Paramedics marked the driver unresponsive at the scene. Massive cranial trauma. The report was brief, efficient. Just the necessary facts. That's usually all I read. Just enough to get through the prep. I don't linger over the lives people had before they arrived on my table. It helps, keeping it procedural. Compassionate, yes. But distant. Detached. Still, there were always little details that stuck. The name, for instance, Richard Collins. Strong, clean. Like someone who used to sign paperwork with confidence. I remember that he was confirmed by family, an older sister, I think. That was noted in the intake. Beyond that, there wasn't much. No watch, no wedding ring, no wallet in the effects bag. I assumed the rest was still with the police or hospital. The room that night was the same as always. Sterile. Cold. Humming with that ever-present low vibration from the overhead ventilation system. The prep lights buzz faintly above me, fluorescence designed for clarity, not comfort. There's one observation window on the far wall, maybe 2 feet square, positioned at head height. It allows family members or students to watch if they wish. But that night, it was dark on the other side. The hallway lights were off. The door to the viewing corridor was locked, as I always ensure it is when I work alone. I remember glancing at it once, confirming it was shut tight. That was when I first felt it. Not saw, felt. A shift. Subtle. Like pressure behind my shoulders. Like the weight of a gaze you can't place, that ancient instinct that tells you when someone is watching. It didn't make sense. I had checked the building. I always do. No one had signed in after hours. No footsteps, no voices. Just me, the body, and the low hum of the pump. I told myself it was exhaustion. I'd been running on caffeine and autopilot, having covered 3 back-to-back prep shifts due to a scheduling error. Lack of sleep makes your mind pliable, your senses unreliable. You start hearing phantom footsteps, catching movement out of the corners of your eyes. So I pushed the thought down, returned my focus to the sutures. The Y incision was clean. I always take pride in my stitching, tight, discreet, symmetrical. I was midway down the sternum, threading the final stretch, when I paused to wipe sweat from my brow. The surgical mask itched along my cheek, damp from breath. I glanced up, just reflex. And that's when I saw it. His eyes were open. Now, to be clear, that's not unheard of. The lids can shift post-mortem. Eye caps aren't perfect, especially if tissue starts to dry or the head changes position slightly. I've seen it happen. But this was different. I stopped what I was doing. Scissors frozen in hand midair. Because I remembered placing the caps with precision. I always do. Inserted under the lids, shaped to hold curvature. I'd closed the eyes myself. I was sure of it. There hadn't been a tremor, no jostle of the table, no vibrations. Nothing had touched the body since I began the sutures. And yet there they were, his eyes, wide open, glassy and unblinking. Not rolled back. Not unfocused. Fixed. Straight up toward the surgical lights. No slackness in the gaze. No detachment. The pupils were wrong, too, fully dilated, yes, but alert. Too sharp. I felt it again, that weight in the room. The air, usually cool and clean, had grown heavy. Still. As though it were listening. Watching. I set my tools down gently, the stainless steel clicking against the tray. I leaned closer, examining him, half expecting to find some mechanical explanation. Maybe a shift in the eyelid from drying tissue. Maybe the caps had slipped. But they hadn't. They were gone. Not dislodged. Gone. I hadn't removed them. No sign of them on the floor. Not tucked into the folds of the sheet. Nothing. I waved my hand slowly over his face. Nothing. No movement. Of course not. He was dead. Had been for 48 hours. Embalmed. Cavity treated. Rigid. Still. I reinserted a new pair of caps, pressed the lids shut, and sealed them with a bit of mortuary adhesive. More than I usually use, just to be safe. I watched the eyes for a long moment before I returned to work. Forced my attention back to the chest cavity. Stitch. Pull. Tie. Focus. But every so often, I'd look up. And each time, I expected them to be open again. And eventually, they were. I was rinsing the instruments, warm water hissing into the steel basin, when I turned and saw them, just slightly open this time. Barely enough to notice. But open. The whites visible. The pupils clear. And this time, they weren't staring upward. They were angled. Leftward. Toward me. I didn't move immediately. Just stood there, staring across the room, water running at my side. The air in the room didn't stir. There was no draft. No flutter. Just silence. And the eyes, now angled ever so slightly, like a painting where the subject's gaze follows you no matter where you move. I walked to the table. Slowly. Not out of fear, but out of control. Measured steps. No rush. I examined him again. No changes to the body. No shift in lividity. No pulse, of course. He was still embalmed, rigid. And yet those eyes, they looked aware. This time, I didn't close them. I finished the work. Dressed the sutures. Cleaned the incision. Covered the torso. Moved him into refrigeration and sealed the unit. I logged everything, no notes on irregularities. Nothing in writing. There was no point. But when I turned to leave the prep room that night, I didn't glance at the observation window. Didn't check the locks again. I didn't want to see anything else. You work this job long enough, and you begin to understand, the dead are quiet, yes. But not always silent. Not always unaware. Sometimes, if you're paying attention, you feel it. A gaze. A presence. A weight in the air. Like something watching. Like something waiting. I've worked in this funeral home for nearly 26 years. That's long enough to stop flinching at the little things, the soft creak of old pipes, the flicker of faulty lights, the cold shift of air that slides beneath sealed doors. You get used to the rhythms of the building. The silence becomes a kind of comfort. Familiar. Predictable. And predictability in this line of work is something you come to treasure. It was a Wednesday night, just past 11:30. I remember because I just finished wiping down the prep table, chrome polished, tools aligned, drain, rinse, clean. It's always the last thing I do before I mop the floor. I checked my watch, same as I always do. Routine keeps the mind steady. Keeps the hours from blurring into each other. The air was clean, filtered through our ventilation system, which works better than you'd expect for a building this old. No formaldehyde sting, no metallic tang, just a dry coolness. My boots squeaked lightly against the linoleum as I dipped the mop into the bucket, wrung it out, and began to swipe broad arcs across the floor. The sound echoed softly, bristles against tile, plastic wheels ticking faintly on the mop bucket. And then I heard it. Not loud. Not jarring. Just a shift. A soft sound. Like someone dragging their feet across a hospital floor. Socks, maybe? Not shoes. A soft, deliberate shuffle. From the back hallway, near cold storage. I stopped moving. Mop mid-stroke. Head tilted. Silence returned. I told myself it was the compressor. These old units kick in weird sometimes. Pressure shifts, pipes settling, the occasional metal groan. You tell yourself a lot of things in this job. That's how you keep going. But there was something about that sound. It didn't echo like a pipe or a mechanical noise. It wasn't metallic. It was personal. Organic. Something in me, something deeper than logic, tightened. A pause. Maybe instinct. Maybe something older. I set the mop against the wall and walked the hallway, footsteps crisp against the floor. No music playing, no voices. Just the electric buzz of ceiling lights and the hum of the refrigeration unit. The cold room door stood ahead of me, stainless steel, thick, sealed with a heavy rotary bolt. I placed my hand on the latch and turned. The mechanism clunked as it unlocked, the hinges groaned softly as I pulled the door open. A cold gust hit my face. Inside, the room was exactly how it should be. Rows of storage drawers lined the walls, neat, polished, labeled. I checked them all before I started my mop shift. Every one was sealed, bolted. Nothing should have changed. And yet I stood there, listening. The cold made the air feel denser, heavier. Each breath felt thicker in my chest. My gloves crackled faintly as I moved, fingertips brushing along the drawer handles as I passed. Still locked. Still tagged. Then, just as I reached the center aisle, I heard it again. Shove. Shove. To my left. Close. I spun. Nothing. Just drawers. Closed. Untouched. My heartbeat picked up, not fear, exactly, but something adjacent. A sharpening. A need to understand what didn't fit. I moved down the line, checking each drawer methodically. Names. Dates. Tags clipped in place. Until I saw one that wasn't. Drawer B7. Second from the bottom on the west wall. It had no tag. I frowned. That wasn't right. Every drawer in this facility is tagged. That's procedure. Even if the drawer is empty, it gets an unassigned tag. I'm the one who makes them. I'm the one who logs them. I remembered going through the checklist that morning, everything accounted for. I crouched. The drawer was sealed tight. Bolt engaged. I pressed my hand to the handle, cold, unmoving. No scratches. No frost. No signs of tampering. But it wasn't labeled. That meant it was either in use and improperly tagged, or sealed when it shouldn't be. Neither option made sense. The air shifted again. Not temperature, pressure. The kind of pressure you feel before a storm hits. The kind that presses into your ears and makes your skin feel thinner. I stayed crouched there, one hand on the bolt, the other pressed against the floor for balance. Silence. But not the familiar kind. Not the gentle hum of machinery and overhead lights. This silence was weighty. Intentional. Like something was holding its breath, just out of sight. I stood up. Stepped back. Didn't open the drawer. Didn't touch the bolt again. Whatever was inside, or wasn't, could wait until morning. I walked out of the cold room without looking back. Closed the door. Engaged the bolt. Logged the time out of habit. Back in the hallway, I picked up the mop and resumed cleaning. Mechanical. Purposeful. My boots tracked faint, wet squeaks across the floor I'd already done. I didn't return to that drawer that night. The next morning, I arrived early. Checked the logs. Reviewed the storage manifest. Drawer B7 had been marked empty. Logged as unused? That's not possible. Sealed drawers don't stay empty. We don't seal them unless they're occupied. And even then, they're tagged immediately. That's policy. That's safety. That's the kind of mistake that doesn't happen. But there it was. Logged. Empty. Untagged. I asked our director to open it during inspection. Just in case. We unbolted it. Pulled it out. Nothing inside. Still cold. Still sealed. No sign of tampering. No frost buildup. No condensation where it shouldn't be. Just empty. He looked at me, waiting for some kind of explanation. I didn't have one. And I didn't give him one. But from that night on, every time I clean the back hallway, especially when it's late and the building's gone quiet, I hear it. Not often. Just once in a while. A single shuffle. Bare feet. Just outside the cold room door. Always faint. Always brief. Always near drawer B7. And every time, I stop what I'm doing. I don't go check. I don't need to. I've been in this building long enough to know when something doesn't belong. Long enough to know that silence isn't always empty. And long enough to know when you're being watched by something that doesn't want to be found. So I mop. And I move on. And I never leave drawer B7 untended. They brought her in on a Thursday morning. Mid-60s, according to the report. No family listed. Found by a neighbor after 3 days of unanswered knocks and accumulating mail. Her name was Eleanor Jameson. No trauma. No evidence of foul play. Just a quiet ending. The kind that happens when people grow old alone. The kind that doesn't make headlines. The kind that disappears between grocery store aisles and church pews, unnoticed until the silence grows loud enough to be heard. The police report said her utilities were current. Mail neatly stacked inside the door. Fridge had food fresh enough. 1 glass of water half full beside her chair. Curtains drawn halfway. TV off. Everything in its place. Nothing disturbed. The coroner's note read, "Natural causes." I didn't expect anything different. We don't get much family for cases like hers. No obituary placed. No next of kin listed. Just a quiet entry into the system, and then a quiet transition out. We handle it with the same care we give everyone: dignity, precision, respect. But there's a different stillness in those rooms. The kind that settles after long neglect. That clings to the wallpaper and waits by the window. I began the prep just after 9 p.m. I prefer to work at night. Fewer distractions. Fewer eyes watching. Just me, the room, and the rhythm of process. The kind of rhythm that keeps the noise out of your head. The kind that lets you focus. Eleanor was already on the table when I entered. Small frame. Fragile wrists. Fingernails neatly trimmed, as if she'd kept some small routine for herself. Her hair was pinned back with 2 silver clips, old-fashioned, sturdy. I almost didn't want to remove them. But protocol is protocol. I documented everything, then began the arterial incision at the carotid. She'd gone peacefully, that much was clear. No swelling. No trauma. Just skin already softening at the joints, time beginning its quiet work. I remember thinking she looked familiar. Not her face, exactly, but the presence of her. The way her hands were folded over her chest. The neat press of her dress. It reminded me of the women who used to sit in the second pew at my church when I was a boy. The ones who always carried butterscotch candies and wore lavender perfume. Eleanor could have been one of them. The machine clicked on, the hum of the embalming pump filling the room. The kind of sound you stop noticing after the first few years. I connected the tubes, adjusted the pressure, and began the injection. Her limbs relaxed slightly. Tissue accepted the fluid with ease. No complications. No resistance. Everything smooth. Everything quiet. And then I saw it. Not directly. Just in the periphery. Movement. A shift at the edge of my vision, near the far wall. I turned my head, but nothing there. Just the stainless shelving units and a stack of covered trays. I shook it off. My eyes were tired. My body running on routine. But a moment later, it happened again. This time, I looked straight ahead. Focused. And I saw them. 3 figures. Vague. Shadowed. Standing side by side at the far end of the prep room. Just beyond the edge of the surgical light's reach. They weren't clear. No faces. No clothing. Just outlines, human, but not fully present. Not solid. They didn't move. Didn't sway or shift or flicker. Just stood. Still. Watching her. My hand was on the clamp. I didn't move it. I didn't shut off the pump. I just froze. At first, I thought maybe someone had come in. An assistant. Maybe a driver dropping off papers. Even the director, though he rarely worked this late. But the door was shut. Locked. I always lock it. I remember turning the key myself. No one else had signed in. I checked. Still, they remained. Not facing me. Not looking around. Looking at her. That's what unsettled me most. Their posture wasn't hostile. Wasn't curious. It was familiar. Like mourners at a visitation. Like siblings standing at the edge of a casket. Heads slightly bowed. Shoulders slack. Still. I didn't speak. I didn't ask questions. I knew, without knowing how I knew, that they weren't here for me. They were there for her. And somehow, it felt right. Like they'd been waiting. After maybe 30 seconds, maybe more, I don't really know, one of them leaned forward. Not dramatically. Just slightly. Like someone whispering something they've waited a long time to say. And then they were gone. No flicker. No flash. Just absence. Like when a breath leaves a room. Like a final exhale. The pump still hummed. The lights still buzzed. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. I finished the embalming. Quietly. Carefully. I dressed her in a simple blue gown with small pearl buttons. Brushed her hair back and replaced the silver clips. There was no family to request a viewing. No flowers ordered. But I placed a white rose in her hands anyway. It felt right. When I moved her into refrigeration, I didn't speak. But I lingered a little longer than usual. Just a few seconds. Just enough to say goodbye. I still don't know who they were. If they were family. If they were something else. If they were only in my mind. But I do know this, Eleanor Jameson didn't leave this world alone. Whatever came for her, whatever stood in the shadows and waited, came not with malice, but memory. And sometimes, when you've spent your whole life slipping quietly through the edges of the world, that's the most any of us can hope for. A presence. A witness. Someone, something, to see us out. I've worked this job for over 27 years. Long enough to stop flinching at the things that make others uneasy. Long enough to know the difference between a creaky pipe and something out of place. Ours is not a profession given to superstition. We deal in facts. Blood type. Time of death. Incision angle. Volume of fluid. These are the things that matter. The things that stay consistent. You learn to put your faith in them, because the alternative is believing in things you can't measure. But I'm not here to make anyone believe anything. I'm only here to tell you what happened. The man had died in a car crash just outside town. Samuel Harper. Early 40s. Lean. Not much visible trauma. He'd been driving alone when he lost control of the vehicle. No skid marks. No sign he braked. The paramedics said he died on impact. Seatbelt snapped. Windshield webbed in a tight spatter of fractures with a skull imprint at the center. The body arrived that same evening. The transfer team rolled him into the prep room just after 7 p.m. Nothing unusual. I did my standard intake check. Confirmed identity. Reviewed the notes. Fracture at the base of the skull. Blood pooled along the neckline. Jaw slightly misaligned. But all manageable. I'd handled worse. While they were unloading him, one of the drivers, Tom, I think, made a comment. "That's the guy who used to whistle," he said. "Always the same damn tune. Drove people crazy." It didn't register much at the time. I was more focused on the bruising along the temple, checking for swelling. The comment was just noise. People say all kinds of things when they're uncomfortable. But I'd remember it later. That night, I was the only one in the building. Happens more often than people think. Especially on Thursdays. We stagger shifts to save on overhead, and I don't mind the solitude. It gives me time to work without interruption. To move at my own pace. Samuel was already on the table. I'd cleaned the external wounds, stitched where necessary, patted the jaw to restore symmetry. Classical music played softly from the small Bluetooth speaker in the corner. Bach, I think. Maybe Chopin. The speaker battery was nearly dead, so I unplugged it to preserve what was left and let the music fade. The building settled into its familiar quiet. Just a low hum of refrigeration. The occasional tick of cooling metal. Nothing unusual. Until I heard it. A whistle. 4 notes. 2 high. 1 low. Then back up again. Not loud. Not sharp. Just clear. Deliberate. It came from the hallway, just beyond the prep room door. I looked up, scalpel still in hand. The hallway was empty. I could see the entire stretch from where I stood. Fluorescent lights buzzed above. Nothing moved. Nothing stirred. I stood motionless for a moment, waiting. Listening. Silence. I checked my phone. No alarms. No audio apps running. I checked the speaker again, still off. Unplugged. Nothing playing. Then, the whistle repeated. Same 4 notes. Same rhythm. This time, a little farther down the hallway. Fainter. Moving toward the refrigeration unit. I set my tools down slowly. Removed my gloves. Wiped my hands clean. I didn't panic, but I won't lie, my throat felt tight. Not fear. Not yet. Just a pressure. A warning. I stepped into the hallway. Each footstep echoed too loudly, like the building had grown hollow. The overhead lights flickered faintly. The air smelled like steel and bleach, same as always, but heavier. Like someone had just walked through and left the door swinging behind them. I reached the refrigeration room. Opened the door. Rows of zipped bags rested on their trays. Each one tagged. Each one undisturbed. Nothing out of place. Nothing moved. Still, I waited there. Just for a moment. Nothing. No sound. No whistle. I shut the door. Went back to the prep room. Sat on the stool by the tray table. Just sat. Didn't speak. Didn't move. And then, for reasons I still can't explain, I opened Samuel Harper's personal effects. It's not protocol. We're not supposed to unless family requests something. But something pushed me. Call it curiosity. Call it instinct. I don't know. Inside the evidence bag, a set of keys. A worn leather wallet. A half-empty pack of chewing gum. And a receipt from the diner down on 4th Street. At the bottom of the receipt, scribbled in pen beneath the total, was a short note. You and that damn tune, I'll be humming it all night again. That was when the chill hit me. Not from the room. From inside. Deep, steady, bone-level unease. I resealed the bag. Stood up. Finished the prep in silence. I left the building around 1:30 a.m. Didn't hear the whistle again that night. But the next evening, just before midnight, it returned. Same pattern. Same pitch. Same part of the hallway. Always between midnight and 1. Always near the prep room. It never moved beyond that. Never grew louder. Never tried to pull me deeper into the building. It just lingered. For 3 nights in a row I heard it. No security breach. No signs of forced entry. No malfunctioning equipment. Just 4 notes. Faint. Human. I stopped telling myself it was imagination after the second night. I told no one. There was nothing to tell. We cremated Samuel Harper the following Tuesday. And that night, the night the body was gone, the whistle stopped. Just like that. Silence returned. Not the heavy kind. Not the kind that pressed against your ribs. Just quiet. Simple. Ordinary. Like something had finished what it came to do. They tell you, when you start working in a mortuary, that the dead are silent. And for the most part, they are. But silence has texture. It has depth. And if you stay in it long enough, if you work these rooms at night, alone, you start to notice the things that move in the corners of stillness. Some things stay behind. Some things repeat. And some things just want to be heard. They tell you, when you start working in a mortuary, that the dead are silent. And for the most part, that's true. But silence isn't just absence, it has weight, texture, layers you learn to notice when you've been around it long enough. Sometimes that silence feels complete. Other times, it feels like it's holding something back. I started at Marrow Creek Mortuary in the winter of 1998. The building itself had been standing for nearly a century. Red brick exterior, white trim, a small chapel in the front. The prep room was in the back, tucked behind thick doors and a narrow hallway. That's where I spent most of my time. There was a light in that room I'll never forget. An old surgical lamp, mounted on a retractable arm that could be pulled into position over the table. Heavy, solid metal, not the lightweight plastic they use now. It had to be pushed into place with effort, the hinges stiff and worn. No give. No swing. Once you parked it somewhere, it stayed there unless you moved it. At least, that's how it should have been. My first week there, I'd just finished a long case. A man in his 40s struck by a truck on the interstate. Multiple fractures, facial reconstruction required. I was about to shut the place down for the night when I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. The lamp was swaying. Just a little. Back and forth. Slow, steady arcs. No windows were open. The AC was off. The pump had been shut down. The room was still. Completely still. I stood and watched it for a minute or two, waiting for it to stop. It did eventually, and I convinced myself I'd brushed it without noticing. Metal settles. Old hinges creak. There were explanations. There always are, in the beginning. But a few nights later, it happened again. It was nearly the same time, just after 3 in the morning. I'd finished my work and was cleaning up when I saw it, the lamp, parked to the side of the table, moving in that same slow, deliberate rhythm. No draft. No vibration. No one else in the room. The air was so still I could hear the faint buzz of the fluorescent tubes above me. That was when I started keeping track. I marked each night it happened on a clipboard I kept tucked in the bottom drawer of my desk. March 14th, March 16th, March 17th. Always between 3 o'clock and 3:15 in the morning. Always when I was alone. Always that same silent sway, 4 to 6 inches in either direction, as though someone had just nudged it. It wasn't every night. Sometimes weeks would pass with nothing. But when it did happen, I noticed something that made my skin tighten. The lamp never moved when I was working on someone who died naturally. Not once. It only happened with accident victims. Suicides. Homicides. Deaths that were sudden, violent, or both. Especially when there was trauma to the head or chest. April 3rd. A boy 14 years old, who fell from scaffolding on a construction site. Skull fracture. Compound fracture of the arm. The lamp began to move before I even made the first incision. April 22nd. An elderly woman, victim of a murder-suicide. Blunt force trauma to the temple. Same thing. I changed the bulb. I tightened the joints. I even had a technician come in to inspect it. He told me it was perfectly functional. No reason for it to move on its own. I asked him to stay late and see for himself. That night, nothing happened. It never did when someone else was in the room. One night, I decided to test it differently. I stayed late, but left the table empty. No body. No work. Just the lamp, parked over a steel tray. I stood in the corner with my arms crossed, watching. For nearly 45 minutes, nothing happened. My back ached. My feet hurt. I was about to leave when I saw it, a single twitch, so small I almost missed it. Then the sway began. Slow. Smooth. Back and forth. No sound except the faint creak of the hinge. I checked the room for air currents with a lit candle. The flame didn't flicker once. Whatever moved that lamp wasn't wind. From then on, I stopped trying to explain it. I just adapted. Some nights, it would start while I was still working. I'd be bent over, closing an incision, and see it move in the corner of my eye. I never said anything. Never acknowledged it out loud. But I learned not to stand directly under it when it started. I'd shift to the side, give it space, and finish my work without looking at it too long. Years passed. The pattern stayed the same. Sudden deaths. Violent deaths. Trauma cases. Never the others. Never peaceful passings. There's a kind of understanding you develop in this job, an agreement with the building, with the work, maybe even with the dead themselves. You don't pry. You don't push. You respect the rules, spoken or not. But even now, after all these years, I still keep track. 26 years in, I could tell you every single name, every single cause of death tied to those nights when the lamp began to sway. I could tell you which cases it started before I touched the body, and which waited until I was almost finished. I could tell you the exact dates when it didn't move for months, and then started again without warning. It's never tried to do more than sway. Never swung violently. Never crashed down. It just moves. Quiet. Measured. Like it's letting me know it's there. I've stopped asking myself what it means. Whether it's just a coincidence, or some kind of leftover echo, or something else entirely. There's no answer that would change what I do. There's only the work, and the things that happen around it. When it moves now, I don't flinch. I don't hurry. I finish what I'm doing. And when I'm done, I step back, look at the lamp, and say one thing, softly, just once. I hear you. Then I turn off the lights and go home.